Sarah Brennan woke to the sound that had haunted her nightmares for months. Men shouting in the darkness, the thunder of horses, the unmistakable crack of rifle fire echoing through the Black Hills. She sat up in her narrow bed, heart pounding, and listened intently. The sounds were coming from the direction of Beaver Creek, maybe half a mile from her father's old trading cabin. It was October 1876, and Dakota Territory was a powder keg ready to explode. Just 4 months earlier, Lieutenant Colonel Custer and his men had been wiped out at the Little Bighorn, and the army was hell-bent on revenge. Gold miners were flooding into the Black Hills, despite treaties that promised these sacred lands to the Lakota, and violence erupted daily between settlers, prospectors, soldiers, and the indigenous peoples being systematically driven from their ancestral territory. Sarah's father, Thomas Brennan, had been a fair trader who'd earned respect from both white settlers and Lakota bands by dealing honestly with everyone. When he died of pneumonia the previous winter, leaving 17-year-old Sarah alone in the wilderness, many had expected her to give up the trading post and move to Deadwood or Rapid City. But Sarah was as stubborn as her father had been, and she'd kept the post running through sheer determination, maintaining the relationships her father had built over 15 years. The shouting outside grew louder, closer. Sarah dressed quickly in the pre-dawn darkness, practical wool pants, a heavy shirt, boots, and grabbed her father's Sharps rifle. She moved to the window and carefully peered out. What she saw made her blood run cold. A group of cavalry soldiers, maybe 8 or 9 men, were gathered in the clearing near the creek. But these weren't regular army. Their uniforms were mismatched. Their discipline was non-existent, and their leader, a bull-necked sergeant with a scarred face, was someone Sarah recognized with a sinking heart, Marcus Drummond, a man her father had once thrown off the property for trying to cheat Lakota traders and incite violence. And in the center of the group, bound hand and foot and tied to a tree, was a young Lakota warrior. Even from a distance, Sarah could see he'd been beaten. His face was swollen, blood darkened his buckskin shirt, and he slumped against his bonds in a way that suggested either unconsciousness or complete exhaustion. The soldiers were passing a whiskey bottle, laughing, and from the fragments of conversation that carried on the cold morning air, Sarah understood with growing horror what was happening. Wait till full light. Let the other savages see what happens. Message needs to be clear. You help Sitting Bull, you end up... Crook will pin medals on us for this. Provoke them into attacking. Give the army the excuse they were going to execute him publicly at dawn. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because they wanted to provoke the Lakota into retaliating, giving the army justification for a full-scale assault on the remaining free bands. Sarah's hands trembled on the rifle. This was none of her business. She was a lone white woman in dangerous territory, and the smart thing, the safe thing, would be to stay inside, bar the door, and pretend she'd seen nothing. These soldiers were dangerous men operating outside proper military authority, and crossing them would have consequences. But as the sky began to lighten in the east, painting the Black Hills in shades of gray and gold, Sarah thought about her father. Thomas Brennan had built his reputation on fairness and honor, had taught Sarah that every person deserved dignity, regardless of their heritage. He had believed that the conflicts tearing apart Dakota Territory weren't inevitable, that good people on both sides could find ways to coexist if they had the courage to try. "What would you do, Papa?" Sarah whispered to the empty cabin. She already knew the answer. Her father would have done the right thing, regardless of the cost. And so would she. Sarah checked her rifle, made sure her knife was secure in her belt, and filled her pockets with ammunition. Then she did something that was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. She walked out the front door into the pre-dawn light and headed straight toward the soldiers. "Morning. Gentlemen," she called out, keeping her voice steady and her rifle pointed at the ground but ready. "Awful early for target practice, isn't it?" The soldiers spun toward her, several reaching for weapons before recognizing she was a white woman. Sergeant Drummond's scarred face split into an ugly grin. "Well, if it ain't little Sarah Brennan, your daddy's dead, girl. You got no business out here anymore. My father's name is still on the deed to this land, Sergeant, and that includes the creek you're using. I'm well within my rights to ask what you're doing here. Army business. Nothing that concerns you. Really." because from here it looks like you've got a prisoner who's been beaten half to death. And you're planning something that's definitely not regulation army procedure." Sarah took a few steps closer, her eyes taking in details. The warrior was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 20 or 21, with strong features and long black hair matted with blood. His eyes were closed, but she could see his chest moving. "Still alive, then?" "That savage is a scout for Crazy Horse," Drummond said, his voice hardening. "We caught him spying on our positions. He's a legitimate prisoner of war, and what happens to him is military business. If he's a legitimate prisoner, why isn't he at Fort Meade? Why are you holding him out here in secret?" The question hung in the cold morning air. Several of the soldiers shifted uncomfortably, and Sarah realized that not all of them were comfortable with what was happening. Some of these men were following orders, but they had doubts. "I don't have to explain myself to a girl," Drummond snarled. "You need to get back to your cabin and mind your own business before you get hurt." "Or what? You'll shoot me too? Murder a white woman on her own property? That'll play well with the territorial governor." "I'm sure." Drummond's hand moved toward his sidearm, and Sarah raised her rifle slightly, still not pointing it at anyone, but making it clear she was armed and capable. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Sergeant, but I am asking you, as the property owner, to release your prisoner and move off my land. Whatever you're planning, do it somewhere else. Can't do that. Orders." "Whose orders?" "Because I know Captain Harrison at Fort Meade, and he's a by-the-book officer who wouldn't authorize an execution without a court-martial. So whose orders are you really following?" The silence that followed confirmed Sarah's suspicions. These men were operating on their own authority, probably with tacit approval from officers who wanted deniability. They wanted to provoke Lakota retaliation, wanted to restart open warfare, and they weren't particular about the methods. "Last chance, girl. Walk away." Sarah looked at the bound warrior, at the soldiers with their rifles, at the rising sun painting the black hills in golden light. She thought about her father, about his belief in doing right regardless of consequences. She thought about the chain of violence and revenge that had consumed Dakota territory, and how it would never end as long as good people chose safety over justice. She made her decision. "No," she said quietly, "I won't walk away. This is my land, and I'm ordering you to release your prisoner. Now." Drummond laughed, and his men joined in. "You ordering me? Girl, you got no authority here. You're nothing but—" He didn't finish the sentence because Sarah did something unexpected. She fired her rifle into the air, the crack of the shot echoing through the hills like thunder. Birds exploded from the trees and the horses spooked, several of them pulling loose from where they'd been carelessly tied. In the chaos that followed, Sarah dropped the rifle and ran. Not away from the soldiers, but toward them, toward the bound warrior. She pulled her father's hunting knife from her belt as she ran, and before anyone could react, she was at the tree, sawing at the ropes binding the warrior's hands. "Stop her!" Drummond roared, but his men were trying to calm the panicked horses and grab weapons, and precious seconds were lost. The rope parted. The warrior's eyes snapped open, dark and alert and filled with sudden comprehension. Sarah moved to his feet, cutting those bonds too, and when he was free, she pressed the knife into his hand and said 3 words she'd learned from her father's Lakota trading partners. "Naka. Inilayo. Run. Go now." For a heartbeat, they locked eyes. This white girl who'd just sacrificed everything to save him, and this Lakota warrior whose life she'd given back. Then he moved, faster than Sarah would have thought possible for someone so badly injured. He vaulted onto one of the loose horses with fluid grace, kicked it into motion, and galloped toward the pine-covered hills. Shots rang out as the soldiers finally got organized, but the warrior was already disappearing into the forest, and the morning mist and trees provided cover. Within seconds he was gone. Drummond spun on Sarah with murder in his eyes. "You stupid, stupid girl. Do you have any idea what you just did?" Sarah stood her ground, though her legs were shaking. "I stopped you from committing murder on my property. I'd do it again. That warrior's going straight to Crazy Horse. He's going to tell them we had him, tell them you helped him escape. And when the Lakota come, and they will come, they're going to remember you're the one who let him go. You just painted a target on yourself from both sides." The truth of this hit Sarah hard, but she refused to show fear. "Then I suggest you leave my property before witnesses arrive, and I tell them about your unauthorized execution plans." "Oh, your ribs are still broken," she said, examining him with the practical eye of someone who'd learned frontier medicine from necessity. You shouldn't be riding this hard. I ride or I die, he replied simply. Soldiers will not stop until they catch us. Pain is temporary, death is permanent. Despite the grim situation, Sarah almost smiled at his matter-of-fact tone. She helped him rebandage his ribs using strips torn from one of her spare shirts, and she noticed several of the other warriors watching with interest. A white woman treating their wounded with care was probably unexpected. They were preparing to mount up again when one of the rear scouts came galloping up, speaking rapidly in Lakota. The warriors' expressions darkened, and Spotted Eagle translated for Sarah. The soldiers reached your cabin, He paused, choosing words carefully. They burn it, all of it, trading post, barn, everything. They want to destroy any evidence of what really happened, make it look like Lakota attack. And they send riders in many directions searching for you. Sarah felt her heart break, even though she'd known this was coming. Her father's legacy, 15 years of careful work building bridges between communities, destroyed in minutes by vengeful men with matches. She thought of her mother's curtains burning, her father's journals turning to ash, the walls that had sheltered her collapsing into ruin. I hate them, she said quietly, surprising herself with the intensity of her emotion. I hate what they're doing, what they've done, how they've turned this whole territory into a battlefield where decent people can't survive. Hatred is poison, Spotted Eagle said, not unkindly. It burns the one who carries it worse than any fire. Better to focus on what you can build than what they destroy. They rode on, and as the afternoon wore into evening, Sarah began to feel the full weight of her situation. She was fleeing into Lakota territory with warriors, branded a traitor by her own people, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a few belongings in her saddlebags. Behind her, everything she'd known was literally burning. Ahead of her was uncertainty, danger, and a life among people whose language she barely spoke and whose customs she only partially understood. But she also felt something else, something unexpected. Freedom. For months, she'd been trapped by her determination to maintain her father's trading post, locked into a life that was becoming increasingly impossible as tensions escalated. She'd been surviving but barely, existing in isolation and fear. Now, despite the danger, despite the loss, she felt like she was finally moving forward, instead of just holding on. As sunset approached, they reached a high ridge overlooking a vast valley. In the distance, Sarah could see smoke rising from where her cabin had been, a funeral pyre for her old life. Spotted Eagle stopped his horse beside hers and gestured at the smoke. They want you to see this, want you to know the cost of helping us. They think this will break your spirit, make other whites fear to show us kindness. He looked at her seriously. Does it break you? Sarah thought about it, watching the smoke spiral up into the darkening sky. No, she said finally. It makes me angry. It makes me sad, but it doesn't break me. My father taught me that buildings are just wood and stone. What matters is what you build inside yourself, your principles, your courage, your refusal to let cruel people make you cruel too. They can burn the cabin, but they can't burn that. Spotted Eagle smiled slightly. Your father was wise man, and you are his daughter. This is good. They camped that night in a hidden valley with a small stream, the warriors posting guards and keeping fires small and smokeless. Sarah sat slightly apart from the group, exhausted emotionally and physically, trying to process everything that had happened in less than 24 hours. Red Cloud's son approached with a wooden bowl containing stew, venison and roots that smelled better than Sarah expected. He sat down nearby, moving carefully because of his ribs, and they ate in companionable silence for a while. Why you do it? He asked finally. Why you save me? You not know me. I am enemy to your people. Sarah considered the question, the same one she'd been asking herself. You're not my enemy. Drummond and men like him, they're the real enemies. They want war because it serves their purposes, gives them power, makes them important, lets them act like heroes while doing terrible things. But you? You were just a young man who'd been beaten and left to die. How could I call myself a good person if I walked away from that? Many would walk away. Many do walk away, I know, but I couldn't. My father used to say that civilization isn't measured by your buildings or weapons or wealth. It's measured by how you treat people who can't fight back, people who are at your mercy. He said if you can walk past suffering when you have the power to help, you're not civilized, you're just pretending to be. Red Cloud's son was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "Your father sound like my father. He also believe in honor, in treating all people with respect. He make peace with many tribes, even old enemies, because he say we all live on same Mother Earth, we all need same things. Food, shelter, family, purpose. He killed when he must, but he never kill for sport, for hate. Soldiers kill him not because he do bad thing, but because he do good thing. He make it hard for them to call all Lakota savages when he show honor and wisdom." "I'm sorry," Sarah said simply. "For your father, for mine, for all the good people caught in this stupidity. But maybe," Red Cloud's son said, looking at her with hope in his dark eyes, "maybe you and I, we can continue what our fathers start, show that people from different tribes can respect each other, help each other, learn from each other. Maybe we can build something good from all this burning." It was a beautiful idea, fragile as spun glass, probably impossible. But sitting there in the firelight with smoke rising from her destroyed home in the distance, Sarah found herself believing in it anyway. Because what else was there? Hatred, revenge, more violence? Those paths led nowhere but deeper into darkness. "Maybe we can," she agreed softly. "I'd like to try." The next morning they broke camp at dawn and continued west toward the main Lakota camp, where Spotted Eagle's band was staying. "The journey would take 3 more days," Spotted Eagle explained, "and they would need to be careful because army patrols were everywhere, searching for Sitting Bull's band and any allies who might be helping them." As they rode, Sarah began to learn more about her companions. Red Cloud's son told her stories about growing up in the Black Hills when they still belonged entirely to his people, when the Lakota could hunt and live according to their traditions without constant interference. He described the sacred places in these mountains, the ceremonies that connected his people to the land, the intricate network of relationships between different bands and tribes. In turn, Sarah told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her mother's death from fever, about her father's decision to move west and start fresh. She explained how her father had learned to respect indigenous peoples through direct interaction, rather than accepting the prejudiced stories told by others, and how he'd taught her that every culture had wisdom worth learning. He used to say that the problem wasn't different peoples living in the same territory, Sarah recalled. The problem was that one side wanted to force everyone else to live exactly their way, to give up everything that made them who they were. He said if we could just respect each other's differences, instead of trying to erase them, there would be enough land and resources for everyone. "Your father dreamed same dream as my father," Red Cloud's son said. "But dreaming is easy. Making dream real is hard, especially when powerful men profit from war." On the second day they had their first real scare. One of the scouts reported an army patrol approaching from the south, about 15 soldiers, moving systematically through the area. The Lakota warriors quickly took defensive positions in a rocky area that would be easy to defend but hard to attack. Sarah's heart raced as she hid among the rocks with mist, keeping the horse quiet. While soldiers passed less than 200 yards away, she could hear their voices, could catch fragments of conversation that chilled her, supposed to be somewhere in this area. "Traitor who helped that savage escape. Orders are to bring her back for trial." But accidents happen in the wilderness. They wanted her dead or captured, and they weren't particular about which. Sarah pressed herself against the cold stone and tried not to breathe too loudly, while Red Cloud's son crouched nearby with his bow ready, prepared to fight to protect her if necessary. The patrol passed without incident, but it was a stark reminder of how precarious her situation was. She was now hunted by her own people, considered a traitor for showing mercy, marked for punishment because she'd chosen conscience over convenience. That night, as they camped in another hidden valley, Spotted Eagle came to speak with her seriously. "You understand now what your choice means. Soldiers will not stop hunting you. They will tell stories that you are traitor, that you help kill white people, that you join with hostiles. Your name will be poison among your own people." "I understand," Sarah said quietly, "but I can't regret what I did." "I won't regret it." "Good, because when we reach camp you will face choice again. My people, they remember many betrayals by whites, many broken promises, many lies, much suffering. Some will welcome you because you saved Red Cloud's son. But some will distrust you, will think you a spy or that you only help to save yourself. You will need to prove yourself worthy of trust, and this will take time. I'm willing to try. This is good, because what we need now, what both our peoples need, is someone who can stand between two worlds, someone who understands both sides, who can speak truth to both sides, who can help prevent more killing. Your father tried to be this person. Now maybe you can be. As they approached the Lakota camp on the third day, Sarah felt her anxiety mounting. She was about to enter a world completely foreign to her, to live among people who had every reason to hate whites, to try to build bridges while being hunted by her own people. It seemed impossible. But when they crested the final ridge and she saw the camp spread out below, dozens of teepees arranged in careful patterns, children playing, women working, men tending horses, smoke rising from cook fires, she felt something unexpected, hope, because down there were families trying to survive, people who wanted the same things she wanted, safety, purpose, connection. They might speak a different language and follow different customs, but they were human, and humanity was the bridge. Red Cloud's son rode up beside her, his ribs healing but still tender. "Welcome," he said simply, "to your new home." As they rode down into camp, Sarah Brennan knew her old life had truly ended. The soldiers had lit fires across her land at sunset, destroying everything she'd known. But from those ashes, maybe something new could grow. Maybe she could help build the bridge her father had dreamed of. Maybe mercy had a power that fire couldn't destroy. She was about to find out. The arrival in camp was both overwhelming and surprisingly anticlimactic. Sarah had half expected hostility or dramatic confrontations, but what she got instead was curious stares and cautious neutrality. Word had apparently spread about the white woman who had saved Red Cloud's son, and people seemed to be reserving judgment, waiting to see what she would do. Spotted Eagle led her to a teepee at the edge of the camp circle, a space that was technically within the community but also separate, which Sarah understood was both practical and symbolic. She would be protected but also watched, included but also distinct. It would be up to her to prove herself worthy of deeper acceptance. An elderly woman with kind eyes and weathered hands came to help Sarah settle in. Her name was Walks with Dawn, and she spoke almost no English, but her gestures were clear. This is where you sleep. This is how you arrange things. This is how you tend the fire. Sarah followed her instructions carefully, grateful for the practical guidance that distracted her from the enormity of what she'd done. That evening there was a council meeting. Red Cloud's son insisted on attending despite his healing ribs, and to Sarah's surprise, she was invited to join. She sat quietly at the edge of the gathering, understanding perhaps one word in 10 of the rapid Lakota being spoken, but reading emotions and body language with growing comprehension. Some voices were clearly skeptical. An older warrior spoke with sharp gestures towards Sarah, his tone questioning. A younger man argued passionately, his face showing distrust. But others defended her, Red Cloud's son most prominently, speaking at length about what she'd risked to save him, and Spotted Eagle adding his own endorsement with the authority of his experience and position. Finally, an ancient woman spoke. So old her face was a map of deep wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp and penetrating. When she spoke, everyone fell silent, listening with evident respect. She looked directly at Sarah as she talked, and though Sarah couldn't understand the words, she felt the weight of judgment and assessment. When the old woman finished, Spotted Eagle translated for Sarah. "Grandmother says true speaks. She say you show courage, but courage alone not enough. Many whites show courage when it served them, then show cruelty when that served them better. She say we must watch you, learn who you truly are when no one watching, when being good is hard instead of easy. She say if you prove worthy, you will be accepted fully. If you prove false, you will be sent away. This is fair judgment." "Very fair," Sarah agreed. "I wouldn't trust me either, based only on one action. I understand I need to earn trust." This was translated, and Sarah saw approval in some faces, including the old woman's. Apparently, humility and understanding were valued traits. Over the following days, Sarah threw herself into learning. She worked alongside the women, learning to prepare food in Lakota style, to tan hides properly, to maintain the teepee, to do the 100 small tasks that kept camp life functioning. Her hands, already calloused from frontier life, developed new calluses in different places. Her back ached from unfamiliar labor positions. Her mind struggled to absorb not just language, but entire ways of thinking about the world. Walks with Dawn became her primary teacher, patient despite the language barrier. Through gestures, demonstrations, and the gradual acquisition of vocabulary, Sarah learned the intricate social codes that governed camp life: how to show respect to elders, how to interact appropriately with warriors, how to participate in the communal work that kept everyone fed and sheltered. But she also learned darker things. She heard stories, translated haltingly by Red Cloud's son during evening conversations, about massacres of peaceful villages, about children taken to distant boarding schools and forced to abandon their language and culture, about promises made and broken, about a systematic campaign to erase an entire people's way of life. Sand Creek, Red Cloud's son said one evening, his voice heavy with old pain. Peaceful village, flying American flag because they told they would be safe. Soldiers attack at dawn. Kill everyone, elders, women, babies. Some soldiers later say it was wrong, but most celebrate. Call it victory. He looked at Sarah with eyes that had seen too much. How do I trust whites when this is what they do? Sarah had no good answer. She could only listen, could only acknowledge the horror, could only promise by her actions that not all whites were like the ones who committed atrocities. It felt inadequate, but it was all she had. As days turned into weeks, Sarah began to notice changes in how people treated her. Children who had initially given her wide berth started approaching cautiously, curious about the white woman who lived among them. She learned their names, shared small treats from her dwindling supplies, and gradually won smiles and laughter. The women, too, began to warm to her. When Sarah struggled with a particularly difficult task, scraping a hide that kept tearing, several women came to help, showing her the proper technique with patient hands. When she successfully completed a pair of moccasins under Walks with Dawn's guidance, there were genuine congratulations and nods of approval, but it was the warriors who remained most skeptical, and Sarah understood why. She was, after all, from the people who hunted them, who had driven them from their lands, who killed their families. Her presence in camp was a constant reminder of the enemy, and no amount of domestic skill could completely overcome that. 3 weeks after her arrival, everything changed. A hunting party returned with alarming news. Army patrols were converging on the area from multiple directions. Major movements were happening at Fort Meade and other posts. Something big was being planned, and the Lakota bands in the Black Hills were the target. Spotted Eagle called another council, and this time Sarah understood more of what was being discussed. The question was whether to stay and defend their position, to scatter into smaller groups that would be harder to track, or to attempt to reach Sitting Bull's main camp further north, where greater numbers might provide safety. Each option had risks. Staying meant potential battle against superior firepower. Scattering meant dividing families and losing the strength of community. Moving north meant a dangerous journey through territory crawling with soldiers. During a pause in the debate, Sarah surprised everyone by speaking up. "I might be able to help," she said in her still halting Lakota. "I know some of the officers. I know how Army thinks, how they organize patrols, what strategies they use. Maybe I can scout, learn their plans." The suggestion was met with stunned silence. Then voices erupted, some supportive, many opposed. The debate grew heated, with warriors arguing that sending a white woman to spy on the army was either brilliant or insane, or both. Red Cloud's son spoke up firmly. "She risked her life to save me. She lose everything to help us. Now she offer to risk again. This is not strategy of enemy. This is action of ally. We should let her try." Spotted Eagle was more cautious. "If she is caught, soldiers will kill her as traitor. If she succeeds but is seen, they will know someone in camp helps us, and they will hunt harder. If she fails, we learn nothing and lose the bridge she could become. This is great risk." "Everything is risk now," Sarah said quietly. "But I can move places you can't. I can listen to conversations you can't hear. I'm small, I'm fast, and I know the territory. Let me do this. Let me prove I'm here for the right reasons." After long debate, they agreed to let her try. The plan was simple but dangerous. Sarah would ride toward Fort Meade under cover of darkness, scout the area, try to overhear patrol plans or observe troop movements, and return with whatever intelligence she could gather. She would go alone. A group would be too easily spotted, and this way, if she was caught, the camp could truthfully claim they didn't send her. Red Cloud's son insisted on preparing her, teaching her additional skills in stealth and observation that went beyond what her father had taught. "Move like water," he told her. "Flow around obstacles, find lowest path, make no sound. Watch shadows. They tell truth when words lie. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it is wrong." As Sarah prepared to leave, Walks with Dawn gave her a small medicine bag, speaking words that Red Cloud's son translated. "For protection, for courage, for the good spirit that lives in your heart. Come back safe, daughter." The word daughter made Sarah's eyes burn with tears. In just 3 weeks, this elderly woman had offered more maternal care than Sarah had received since her own mother died years ago. Sarah rode out at dusk, her heart pounding with fear and determination. She knew the risks. If soldiers caught her, they would likely execute her on sight as a traitor and spy. But she also knew this was her chance to prove her value to the Lakota, to show that her presence among them was an asset, not just a burden. The ride to Fort Meade took most of the night. Sarah moved carefully, using every trick of stealth her father had taught her, plus the new techniques Red Cloud's son had demonstrated. She circled wide around known patrol routes, used streams to hide her tracks, and stuck to terrain that provided cover. As dawn approached, she found a position in the rocks overlooking the fort's main approach. From here, she could observe without being seen, could watch the comings and goings of soldiers, could potentially overhear conversations if anyone passed nearby. What she saw over the next hours confirmed the Lakota's worst fears. Troops were mobilizing in large numbers, easily 200 soldiers, maybe more. Supply wagons were being loaded for extended operations. Cavalry units were drilling in coordinated maneuvers. This wasn't a routine patrol. This was a full-scale campaign. As midday approached, Sarah's patience was rewarded. A group of officers gathered near her hiding spot to review maps and discuss strategy. She strained to hear every word, and what she learned made her blood run cold. The camp mobilized immediately. Within hours, teepees were coming down, belongings were being packed, horses were being loaded. It was organized chaos, but clearly something they'd done many times before. A people practiced in the art of survival through mobility. As Sarah helped pack, Red Cloud's son approached her. His ribs had healed well over the past weeks, and he moved now with his natural grace restored. "You save us today," he said simply. "Give us information we need to survive. Risk your life again to help people who are not your own." "They are my people now," Sarah replied, surprising herself with how true it felt. "Not by blood, but by choice. And that's stronger, I think. Blood is accident of birth. Choice is deliberate act of will," he smiled. A real smile that transformed his serious face. "My father would like you." He believed same thing, that family is not only blood but also shared values, shared purpose, shared struggles. "You are our sister now, Sarah Brennan, fully and truly." The journey north was grueling. They traveled fast, mostly at night, using every trick to hide their trail. They crossed streams to confuse tracking dogs, used rocky terrain that wouldn't hold footprints, split up and rejoined to create false trails. Sarah learned more about wilderness survival in those few days than she'd learned in years at the trading post. But they weren't the only ones moving. Several times they spotted other Lakota bands heading north as well, all converging towards Sitting Bull's location, all fleeing the massive campaign that was sweeping through the Black Hills. The army's strategy was working. They were pushing all the scattered bands toward one location, where overwhelming force could be brought to bear. On the 4th day of travel, scouts reported both good news and bad news. Good, they were close to Sitting Bull's camp. Bad, army columns were closing in from multiple directions, and it would be a near thing whether the scattered bands could reach safety before being intercepted. That night, as they made a cold camp with no fires to avoid detection, Sarah sat with Walks with Dawn, Red Cloud's son, and Spotted Eagle. They were exhausted, hungry, and increasingly worried about what would happen when all the bands converged. "Maybe I should go to the army," Sarah said quietly. "Maybe if I surrender, if I give them what they want, they'll call off some of the pursuit. It's me they want to make an example of." "No." Red Cloud's son's voice was sharp. "They want you, yes, but they also want war. They want to force all Lakota onto reservations, take Black Hills for gold miners, end our way of life completely. You surrendering changes nothing except that you die." "He's right," Spotted Eagle agreed. This campaign not about you. You are excuse justification. They would do this anyway. Your surrender only give them satisfaction of punishing courage, and we will not allow that. Then what do we do? Sarah asked. Because even if we reach Sitting Bull, what then? The army has thousands of soldiers. They have Gatling guns and artillery. They can starve us out, wear us down, eventually force surrender. How do we survive this? There was a long silence. Then Walks with Dawn spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Red Cloud's son translated. Grandmother say we survive same way we always survive. By being smarter, stronger in spirit if not in weapons, by refusing to let them destroy what makes us who we are. She say maybe we lose everything material. But if we keep our honor, keep our dignity, keep our humanity even when they lose theirs, that is victory that cannot be taken by guns. It was small comfort in the face of overwhelming odds, but it was something. As Sarah lay down to sleep that night, wrapped in borrowed blankets under a sky full of stars, she thought about everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained. Her father's trading post was ashes. Her old life was gone. She was hunted by her own people, living among those she'd been raised to fear, facing an uncertain future with no guarantees of survival. But she also had something she'd never truly had before: purpose, community, a cause worth fighting for, and the unshakable certainty that she'd made the right choice regardless of the cost. The next day, as they crested a ridge and saw Sitting Bull's vast encampment spread out below, hundreds of teepees, thousands of people, the last great gathering of free Lakota, Sarah felt tears streak down her face, not from sadness, but from the sheer improbability and wonder of what she was witnessing. Red Cloud's son saw her tears and misunderstood them. "Do not worry. We will protect you. You are safe here." "I know," Sarah said softly. "I'm not crying because I'm afraid. I'm crying because I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." They rode down into camp, and Sarah Brennan, once a lone trader's daughter, now a bridge between worlds, prepared to face whatever came next. The army would come. The conflict would continue. The future was uncertain and frightening, but she would face it with courage, with honor, and with the knowledge that sometimes the most important thing you can do is choose mercy over hatred, understanding over fear, and humanity over prejudice, no matter how high the flames rise around you. She had released a captive warrior at dawn. By sunset, soldiers had lit fires across her land. But from those ashes, she had built something the fire couldn't destroy: bridges between peoples, friendships across divides, and hope that a better future was possible. And sometimes, hope is the strongest thing there is.